a small Zambian town called Mafue near the Longwa River Valley in 1991. The first attack happened at night while two boys were on their way home. The ferocious lion came out of nowhere. One of the boys ran from the bloodthirsty lion. The other was, unfortunately, not so lucky. The only found pieces authorities could find of the child was some bloody and torn clothing and a part of his skull. The second attack went down at the edge of the village. The victim was a grown woman who was probably pretty surprised when the lion literally and very rudely broke through the front door of her hut and then ate her for a snack. The third attack happened shortly after, with yet another young boy dying of severe injuries caused by the rampaging lion. At least 3 more fatal attacks occurred in 1991, with the final being another woman whose home was invaded by the lion. The man-eater of Mafue was finally stopped by a hunter from California named Wayne Hosick. The savage lion's body is currently on display at Chicago's Field Museum, where it has been kept since donated in 1998. Number 9. Black-maned Ethiopian lion. An explorer with National Geographic recently spotted one of the rarest lions in the entire world. Kagan Sekersiglu came face-to-face with the very real king of beasts on a road in the middle of the night in Ethiopia. Rather than peeing his pants and running away, Kagan took out his camera and caught one of the only videos of a black-maned Ethiopian lion. He was in the Bale Mountains National Park studying climate change on birds when the ferocious lion appeared on the side of the road. If you've never heard of the Ethiopian lion, you're not alone. Most people only think about African lions who live in the savannah or in sub-Saharan Africa. But there are a few scant populations of rarer lions living throughout Africa, with the biggest, darkest, and most legendary being the Ethiopian lion. These big cats live in the unpopulated mountains of Ethiopia. The massive cats are known for their exceptionally black manes and were feared extinct until 2016, when about 50 of them were rediscovered. According to National Geographic, these rare few are living in an area about 3 full days of driving from any type of civilization, which is most likely one of the only reasons they still exist. Unfortunately, lions as a whole are considered vulnerable to extinction, with less than 20,000 left in the wild. What would you do if you saw a lion in the middle of the road at night? Would you be like this guy and risk your life for a picture? Or would you get the heck out of there? Number 8. The Barbary Lion. The Barbary lion is definitely extinct. According to Scientific America, the very last Barbary lion of Panthera leo died in 1922 after being killed by a French colonial hunter in the country of Morocco. Barbary lions were also known as Atlas lions, and hundreds of years ago, they roamed freely through the deserts and mountains of Morocco and Egypt. The Barbary lion was once the largest subspecies of lion on the planet, making them some of the biggest and toughest cats that ever lived. They were admired because of their immense size and their dark manes. The royal families of Morocco and other African nations often kept them as pets, and Barbary lions are famous for battling gladiators in the Roman Colosseum over 1,000 years ago. Even the Tower of London infamously held Barbary lions inside of its grounds. Unfortunately for everyone, you would have needed to be alive too many hundreds of years ago to see firsthand one of these majestic beasts. Romans killed thousands of them in the Colosseum, and European hunters finished them off in the 19th century. While they're definitely extinct in the wild, there are several zoos around the world that claim to have Barbary lions in their collections. It's doubtful though. Most, if not all, of these big cats are probably not real Barbary lions, but rather hybrids with the lions from sub-Saharan Africa. I seriously doubt pure North African lions occur in captivity anymore. Luke Hunter, president of Panthera, the conservation organization dedicated to the studying and conservation of big cats, said. Number 7. Tree climbing lions. There is a special breed of lion living in Uganda. The lions here are ordinary African lions, only they like to climb trees, just like your average house cat. They're known as the tree-climbing lions of Ishasha, and they are wildly important for a number of reasons, including the stability of the ecosystem and drawing in safe ecotourism from outside Uganda. But these lions are in some serious trouble. They're running out of room to roam and food to eat. The tree-climbing lions of Ishasha live mainly in Queen Elizabeth National Park, in an area 10 times smaller than the Serengeti National Park, which, of course, is much more famous. These lions also prey primarily on Ugandan kob, a small type of antelope that lives on the grassland. These lions hunt in smaller numbers, which is probably why they don't prey on large buffalo like the lions in other parts of Africa. But there is still hope for these unique tree-climbing lions, who spend much of their days just lounging on tree branches and napping. As said by the director of Uganda's Wildlife Conservation Society, the best way to preserve a future for lions in Uganda is to protect the important grasslands and woodlands that lions rely on. Hopefully, these lions get more land and food soon. What do you think of these lions that like to climb up trees and chill? Would you like to see one snoozing on a branch? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. The monster Liger. If you're interested in the world's largest lion, check out this massive beast that looks more like a saber-toothed tiger than any kind of lion you've ever seen. That's because it kind of is a prehistoric monster. The cat's name is Apollo, and he is the hybrid offspring of both a lion and a tiger. He also weighs 705 pounds or 320 kilograms, making him one of the biggest cats ever bred in the United States, and almost double the weight of either a lion and a tiger. Apollo lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He is of a similar size to the ancient cave lions and saber-toothed tigers that went extinct over 42,000 years ago. According to Mike Holston, known as the Real Tarzan online, Apollo can run up to 40 miles per hour or 64 kilometers per hour and is twice as heavy as a normal lion. Ligers like Apollo can grow to be 12 feet or 3.6 meters long and 6 feet or 1.8 meters tall. Ligers first emerged in the 19th century in India and are only found in captivity. This is because lions and tigers live separately in the wild. It's believed that there are less than 1,000 ligers in the world. Even among ligers, Apollo is rare. He and his 3 brothers became the first white ligers on the planet when they were born in December of 2013 from a white male lion and a white female tiger. Apollo was the smallest at that time, with his owners saying that he behaved more like a kitten, purring all the time and always demanding to be petted. Aww. According to Guinness World Records, the record for the largest living cat actually belongs to Hercules, an adult male liger also living at Myrtle Beach Safari in South Carolina, who is also Apollo's uncle. Hercules weighs over 900 pounds or 408 kilograms, and when standing on his hind legs, he is 11 feet or 3.3 meters tall. Hercules eats around 20 pounds or 9 kilograms of beef or chicken every single day. Number 5. Syrian War Lion. A Syrian War Lion was recently given a shot at love when the Lions Rock Big Cat Sanctuary from South Africa and the Four Paws International Advocacy Group got together and played matchmaker. Saeed the lion, who survived a daring rescue from the zoo where he was being kept in deplorable conditions in Syria, was matched with Nala. It has been over 2 years since Saeed's rescue, and he was just placed in the neighboring area to Nala. Already, Saeed has shown great interest in his female companion. They talk to each other through the fence, and according to the director of the Wild Animals Department at Four Paws, both lions will be placed together in the same habitat if they continue getting along. As for Saeed, it really is a tale of triumphing over the odds. He was born during the war in Syria and had a pretty miserable life before being rescued. After 2 years, his health, both mental and physical, recovered dramatically. Now he's got a nice place to live in Africa where he belongs, and maybe even a girlfriend. Number 4. Ancient Cave Lions. During the last ice age, Panthera spalea, also known as cave lions, lived all across the Earth. Recent genetic studies have shown that cave lions differed quite a bit from modern lions, Panthera leo. They were entirely different species. This genetic study was thanks to a frozen cave lion cub found in Siberia and investigated by Love Dahlin in the Center of Paleogenetics in Sweden. The cub was named Spartak, and she lived 43,000 years ago and was left frozen in the Siberian permafrost. This cub was also less than a month old when she died, and she never even opened her eyes. Cave lions lived throughout Alaska, Eurasia, and the Yukon Territory of modern-day Canada. The last cave lions probably died exactly 14,000 years ago, right at the end of the Ice Age. These lions were much larger than modern lions, and they didn't have manes like you see with African lions today. And they moved from Eurasia into America before the land bridge closed, just like the first migrant humans who came to the Americas. But even though the cave lions looked more intense than modern lions and were arguably more ferocious, they shared similar behavioral traits, such as living in prides and practicing courtship rituals. Number 3. Cape lion. The Cape lion falls into the same category as the Barbary lion, as it went officially extinct quite some time ago. A few controversial lions were found bred in captivity in Russia back in 2000 that some alleged to be extinct Cape lions, and they were brought to South Africa for breeding. Unfortunately, they were never confirmed to be legitimate Cape lions, meaning the species is still effectively extinct. The big difference between Cape lions and Barbary lions was their morphology. Cape lions had huge manes that extended way back behind their shoulders and even covered their bellies. They also had ears with dark black tips. The Cape lion has been called the second largest lion subspecies, with some estimates placing maximum weight at an outstanding 600 pounds or 272 kilograms. That makes it 1.5 times larger than the modern African lion. However, not everyone is convinced that the Cape lion is its own species. Some experts believe the Cape lion is actually just a kind of Transvaal lion from the southernmost region of South Africa. Number 2. The Black Lion Tamarind. It's time to look at the Black Lion Tamarind. And no, it's not actually a lion. The Black Lion Tamarind is the rarest of the New World monkeys and is endemic to the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil. What's truly amazing about these tamarinds is that they look just like lions. They have huge black manes, giving them an air of authority that other monkeys simply lack. They also live exclusively inside a single patch of forest in the Morro do Diabo State Park. The Black Lion Tamarind was thought to be extinct for nearly 65 years. Not a single one was spotted until 1970. Then, in 2016, an adult couple were found to be breeding after 6 years without a single spotting. These monkeys might not be lions, but they're close enough to earn a spot on the list. Black Lion Tamarinds are some of the coolest, most exotic, and least known monkeys in the world. Number 1. The Black Lion? Unfortunately, there are no black lions anywhere on Earth. As cool as it would be for a rare black lion to be roaming around in the jungle, it's simply not true. Even if you see a photograph of a completely black lion posted online, it's definitely a fake digital fabrication. The closest thing on Earth to a real black lion is the black-maned Ethiopian lion, but even it only has a black mane. There are no lions covered in black fur. It's simply not a thing. White lions are another story altogether. Black lions are a myth. White lions are a very real group of rare cats with hair that looks bleached white. These magnificent animals suffer from leucism, like a halfway albinism. Leucism causes the cats to have a coat of hair that's as pale as flour rather than tawny and yellow. It's an uncommon condition, and there aren't many white lions left in the world today. But they definitely exist. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite lion? and what it means. It's one of the biggest archaeological coincidences, with the shape appearing in depictions made in Iraq, Turkey, and even New Zealand. The ancient carvings of deities all appear to be holding one specific type of handbag or another, starting at around the end of the Ice Age. Another early depiction of the handbag design can be seen in the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, which is located in southeastern Turkey at the top of a mountain ridge. That one dates back to approximately 11,000 BCE. But what could a handbag possibly have in common with both the Sumerians and the Maori, and even the Central American Olmecs? To be honest, the handbag often looks just like a modern purse. It's always seen being carried by a mythical being or a god. And one possibility is that the handbag actually represents the cosmos, with the strap of the bag representing the sky while the square base of the handbag represents the planet. Either that, or it could represent the gods carrying with them a bag filled with some kind of secret cosmic knowledge that we can't even begin to comprehend. There are those that believe it is simply an ordinary basket, but researchers believe its symbol could be something much more. What do you think? For how often the same shape is depicted in so many ancient cultures can't just be a coincidence. Number 9. 3 pyramids. Why did almost every ancient society build pyramids? This is one of the biggest coincidences that archaeologists and historians simply can't agree on. Pyramids have been one of the many marvels of the world for quite some time. From Mexico to Egypt, Indonesia to Sudan, and even India, all these places have pyramids that look nearly identical. Putting aside the smooth pyramids of Giza, there are some pyramids in Egypt that are multi-leveled, making them look just like the ones in places like Mexico and Indonesia. And the similarities get even more uncanny. In both Giza and Teotihuacan, there are 3 main pyramids built. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the 3 pyramids are not constructed symmetrically, but with 2 structures opposite one another and the third off to the side. This is the same positioning as the Egyptian pyramids in Giza. It's true that the pyramids are different heights, but there's no denying that they were constructed almost identically. The big question here is why 2 ancient cultures constructed their most impressive monuments identical to one another when they lived thousands of miles apart and thousands of years from each other. Nobody has the answers. Number 8. Christ and Odin. A team of archaeologists in Switzerland recently unearthed a double-sided mold used for crafting Christian jewelry 1,000 years ago. The small object came from around the 9th century AD. It was made from molded clay, and it was used in the forging of at least 7 different types of Christian-themed goodies, from delicate earrings to a crucifix. But the implications of the mold are what we're really talking about. Archaeologists agree that the treasure shows just how turbulent the times were surrounding the arrival of Christianity in Switzerland in the 4th century, brought by Roman soldiers. A closer examination of the artifact has proved that Christian symbols in the clay are actually quite similar to Norse symbols. This has led researchers to speculate whether the mold was originally crafted to make Christian artifacts or pagan artifacts representing the god Odin. It's true that in the beginning of Christianity, Christ was simply worshipped in addition to the old Viking gods. Christ would have been worshipped on par with gods like Thor and Odin. It wouldn't be until later that Christianity eventually replaced the old beliefs of the world. But what if Christ and Odin were the same person? This is the real coincidence. Both of them were crucified, with Odin being stabbed and hung from a tree, and Jesus being stabbed and hung on the cross. Both figures spent 3 days in darkness after sacrificing themselves for a higher purpose. What if Odin turned into Christ? Or even more coincidental, what if Odin was the inspiration for the story of Christ? Number 7. The Temple of the Great Jaguar. The Temple of the Great Jaguar in Guatemala and Bak Se Cham Krong in Cambodia are both ancient temples built by highly advanced ancient civilizations. The big difference is that they are separated by over 9,000 miles, or 14,484 kilometers. Yet despite the vast difference between the 2 temples, they were erected with uncanny similarities. that historians and archaeologists have never been able to explain. It's almost as if both civilizations had the same blueprint for the buildings. So how could two ancient temples dedicated to different gods on different continents have been constructed with remarkable identical style and design? Some say it's all just a big coincidence. Others believe that the ancient Khmer and the ancient Maya got their inspiration for building temples from the same source. The biggest question remains: who was this source, and how did it have contact with both civilizations? Who do you think the source was? Do you have any other explanations for this coincidence? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Number 6. The Pan Flute. The combined evidence of archaeological records and mythological references from across the world point to the Pan Flute being one of the oldest musical instruments on the planet. The Pan Flute has likely been around for at least 6,000 years, but the exact origin of this instrument remains unclear. The ancient Greeks were definitely using the Pan Flute in 2500 BCE, and the Roman poet Ovid provides a mysterious clue to this in his poem Metamorphoses. Sitting on the riverbank, Pan noticed the bed of reeds was swaying in the wind, making a mournful moaning sound, for the wind had broken the tops of some of the reeds. Pulling the reeds up, Pan cut them into pieces and bound them together to create a musical instrument which he named Syrinx, in memory of his lost love. Does this mean the Romans came up with the idea for the instrument? Maybe. However, there was also a Pan Flute being played in China around the same time. Then there was the African Pan Flute, known as the Ngororambe, the circular Pan Flute from Vietnam, the flat Pan Flute from Thailand, and even a Pan Flute from ancient Egypt that dates back to the pharaohs. Going even further back, the ancient pre-Columbians throughout the Americas were using Pan Flutes as early as 4200 BCE. All the Pan Flutes are basically the same. The flutes are either crafted from reeds or bamboo or even clay, and they all work identically. But the coincidence here is, how did basically every culture on Earth from every corner of the globe come up with the idea for the Pan Flute, especially cultures separated by oceans who never even met each other? The truth is that nobody knows. It could just be a coincidence, considering the Pan Flute is pretty simple. Or it could be that some kind of immense being showed early humans across the world how to make music using the same instrument. Number 5. The Celtic Sphinx. When people think of the Sphinx, they think of Egypt. But did you know that the Sphinx was actually a popular creature from Celtic mythology? The Sphinx appeared not only in Egypt, but also in Greece and Germany. There was a gold drinking horn discovered in the burial chamber of a Celtic chieftain in Weiskirchen, Germany, that dates back to the 6th century BCE. There was also a bone sphinx found inside the burial chamber of yet another Celtic chieftain, this time in Baden-Württemberg, Germany. Depictions of the Sphinx are found on Celtic jewelry all throughout the Iron Age. These things even made it onto Celtic coins later on in the Iron Age, around the 1st century BCE. Nobody has been able to draw any connection between the Egyptian Sphinx and the Celtic Sphinx, nor do we know the true significance of this mythological hybrid, or what it meant to the ancient people of Europe and North Africa. Number 4. Crop circles. Crop circles have been found all across the planet, making them one of the most widespread coincidences that not a single person can understand. It's true that crop circles are most often spotted in the United Kingdom and in the USA, but they've also been spotted in Australia and Switzerland. Really anywhere that crops can be turned into unusual patterns. Crop circles began taking shape around the 1960s, making them quite modern. They're also usually accompanied by stories of flying saucers. And to be quite honest, it makes sense that crop circles weren't public knowledge until the 1960s, as it wasn't like people would have had the means to view crop circles from the sky back in the early 1900s and beyond. But who made these circles, and why have they stopped? The elaborate circles found on farmers' fields peaked in the 1990s, when in July of 1996, the most complicated crop circles ever appeared in England near Stonehenge. This particular crop circle was so mysterious and vast, and it appeared so quickly, that people immediately blamed aliens. It turned out later to be a hoax. But are all crop circles hoaxes? Or could some of them be proof of extraterrestrial life? And if it is aliens making crop circles, what dictates where on Earth they place them? Do you have any ideas? Number 3. Extraterrestrial rock art. Rock art has been found all over the world, dating back to the dawn of mankind. There are petroglyphs painted on canyons in the United States that date back at least 8,000 years, made by the original Native Americans. Some of this rock art, specifically the depictions at Sego Canyon, seem to show alien beings, humanoid monsters with huge eyes and oddly shaped bodies. But guess what? They've been found all over the planet, including in Scotland and Egypt. There have even been depictions found in the Sahara Desert that go back to 10,000 BCE and seem to show the same alien creatures drawn in Sego Canyon. The obvious connection here is that prehistoric humans may very well have had contact with an advanced race of extraterrestrials and documented their encounters using rock art. This has never been verified or substantiated, but the coincidental evidence is there plain as day, from the oldest caves in Europe to the oldest rock art found in South America. Number 2. Cranial deformations. Humans have a history of artificial cranial modification, going back 10,000 years. Researchers in eastern France discovered the skull of an aristocrat from 1600 years ago with heavy modification done to her skull. She looked like an alien. These same skulls have been found in Mexico, Peru, and even places like Iran and Turkey. There are honestly too many cultures to name that have practiced cranial deformation. Like I said in the beginning, it's been going on for 10,000 years. The question is, why? Why did so many ancient people try to elongate their heads, either by using wooden planks or tightly bound fabrics? Were they trying to mimic a race of beings who naturally had elongated skulls? There really is no other explanation for why ancient Chinese and ancient Peruvians would have both come up with the idea for this type of body modification. It simply doesn't make sense unless all these different cultures had one specific model they were trying to copy. Perhaps ancient cultures admired extraterrestrial knowledge and thought that by making their head a similar shape, they would somehow advance? Number 1. The Seven Sisters. There has been a story told by our ancestors for the last 100,000 years. It looks slightly different depending on which culture we're talking about, but it really is the same story. In Greek mythology, the story is of the 7 daughters of Atlas. In Aboriginal groups across Australia, it's a story of 7 young girls and has to do with sacred women's ceremonies. The story is told in Europe, Africa, Asia, North America, and South America. In each story, there are 7 sisters, 7 wives, 7 daughters, or otherwise 7 female something. The one thing that stays the same is that there are always 7, and they are always female. The story is based on the stars, specifically a cluster of stars known as the Pleiades. They're located near the constellation Orion. According to anthropologist Daisy Bates, Orion is often seen in these old stories as a hunter of women, with the 7 nearby stars being the women he hunts. And while it's no surprise that all the different cultures of the Earth made up stories about the constellations they saw in the sky, after all, they all would have seen the same stars and would have obviously made up stories about them, the massive coincidence is that all the stories are shockingly similar. Why on earth would Australian Aborigines make up an identical story to the ancient Greeks regarding these stars? Nobody can put their finger on it. There was no contact between the Australian Aboriginal cultures and the outside world for around 50,000 years. How they all pulled the same story out of a hat is beyond science and beyond coincidence. Thanks for watching. What do you think influenced the ancient cultures of the world to build these same things? The scariest thing I could imagine happening on a calm day rowing on the river. It all happened in Colton County, when a group of friends decided to go on a Saturday kayaking trip. The expectation was a bit of excitement, some fresh air, and a good dose of nature. Well, one of the kayakers, 28-year-old Michael Adams, got a bit more nature than he bargained for when the rattlesnake landed directly on the front of his kayak and then bit him twice on the hand when he grabbed it. That was foolish, as he probably should have tried to shoo it into the water with his paddle. But he was probably panicking and grabbed it without thinking. He was bitten and began to feel woozy before one of his nearby friends was able to knock the rattlesnake off the boat. Being bitten by a rattlesnake is bad news. Being bitten by a rattlesnake multiple times is a nightmare. This guy had to get transported by his friends using their kayaks back to a safe area on dry land before they could even call 911. It then took ages for the ambulance to arrive, and even longer before he was able to get administered into the intensive care unit and given antivenom. According to CBS News, the man's condition deteriorated dramatically en route to the hospital. He was in bad condition and needed to be transferred the next day to the Medical University of South Carolina. Let that be a lesson to everyone. Stay away from rattlesnakes. Number 9. When pythons attack. Two young brothers, Connor and Noah Barth, were fast asleep when a vicious 15-foot or 4.6-meter python slithered across their necks and strangled them to death. That's a story that would terrify anyone and give you nightmares just imagining it. The kids never saw it coming, but here's where the deaths get really crazy. The kids were staying overnight at a friend's apartment. That apartment was above a pet shop. On the night of the sleepover, an African rock python escaped its cage, got into the ventilation system, and found its way into the children's bed. This is obviously tragic. The man who runs the Reptile Ocean store lived in the apartment. The victims were his friend's children and would often spend the night. But he never expected in a million years to wake up first thing in the morning and find the boys dead with a snake curled up in a nearby corner. He quickly caged the snake and called 911. Then he had to make the hardest phone call of his life, telling his friend that their children were dead, all because of an escaped python that he owned. He did later go to trial for criminal negligence, but was found not guilty and walked free. Do you think this man should have been sentenced to time in prison? Why or why not? He had kept the snake safely in a locked cage for years without incidents like this ever before. Was the verdict right or wrong? Let me know in the comments below. By the way, remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already. Number 8. Camping gone wrong. A man from Missouri went on a camping trip. He was bitten by a copperhead snake while tenting near the Current River. But he didn't die right away. It's not really clear what the identified man was thinking. He got bitten by the copperhead snake and then complained about chest pain a full day later before dying from a heart attack. It's highly likely that his encounter with the snake had something to do with it. The thing is that people don't really die from snake bites in Missouri. Between 1933 and 2021, there have only been 3 recorded deaths related to venomous snakes. The man probably got bitten and didn't think it was a big deal. But according to the deputy coroner in Carter County, the snake venom definitely contributed to his death. It likely hastened the heart attack, either from the venom itself or from the man's alarm and adrenaline after being chomped by a big, hungry serpent. Number 7. The Zookeeper. In California, a zookeeper recently had a very close call with a large and deadly snake after nearly biting off his face. This particular incident was caught on video and uploaded to the victim's Instagram account. Jay Brewer runs the Reptile Zoo. He is no stranger to things with scales and things that slither. And yet, he almost wound up losing all the skin on his face after the angry python tried sinking its fangs into his eyes. Judging by the video, the python was upwards of 20 feet, maybe even 25, that's 8 meters, and probably over 200 pounds or 90 kilograms. It looked like a prehistoric monster. The attack happened in the split second that Jay took his eyes off the python. It sensed he was looking away and pounced. Would you ever take your eyes off of a giant python if it was near enough to attack you? I hope not. Now, Jay was able to dodge the brunt of the attack. After all, this guy works with snakes that want to eat him all day. Still, he said himself that it was one of the closest encounters he's ever had. He's lucky to still have a nose. Number 6. Snake to the face. Firefighters in Ohio came to the rescue of a woman who was being attacked by her own pet boa constrictor after it wrapped itself around her neck, tried to choke her to death, and repeatedly bit her in the face. Unlike Jay Brewer from the reptile zoo, this poor woman was unable to evade the attack. She's just lucky that her boa constrictor was only 5 feet or 1.5 meters long. The most horrifying thing about this poor woman's plight is the 911 call she made to the dispatch. She phoned 911 and then told them that she had a snake stuck to her face. She then pleaded for an ambulance to save her for over 2 minutes, while she told the 911 operator that the snake was biting her face repeatedly and there was blood everywhere, and that she couldn't get the angry reptile off. In the end, firefighters had to cut the head off of the snake to get it off the poor woman's face. The snake was then tossed into a dumpster out in front of City Hall, and the woman was taken to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. Stories like this make me wonder why people even bother owning snakes in the first place. Wouldn't a nice goldfish be better? What do you think? Number 5. Mama to the rescue. In a shocking video posted by National Geographic, a brave mother rat saved her baby from a terrifying snake attack. Humans are not the only ones who can be bullied by evil snakes. The whole animal kingdom is in danger of these voracious predators. And while people may think of rats as being gross disease spreaders, a mama rat is nothing to mess with. The battle was caught on video in Italy. The snake snatched the baby rat into its jaws and tried to slither away with it, only to be brutally attacked by the rat's mother. Shockingly, the rat managed to take down the non-venomous racer snake and chase it away from the area, forcing it to drop her baby from its jaws. The snake vanished into the bushes, and the mama rat rescued her little one and took off in the other direction, no doubt leaving everyone involved traumatized. Could you imagine fighting off a giant dinosaur or a dragon to save your child? That's essentially what this rat did. Hats off to her. Number 4. Snake in the toilet. A teenager in Thailand has experienced the worst nightmare imaginable. Be prepared for what comes next, because what you're about to hear is graphic and disturbing. It all happened when the 18-year-old boy sat down on the toilet to do his business. When he looked down between his legs, he saw a snake inside the toilet bowl. An instant later, he felt a searing pain in his groin. The python had clamped its jaws around his genitalia. I know you're probably grimacing just thinking about something so horrible. The young man stood up with the snake still attached to him and, thinking quickly, slammed the snake in the door to get it to release its grip. The snake fell off and slithered away. But now the boy was standing in the bathroom with blood all over his legs and groin and his pants around his ankles. And much to his dismay, the snake slithered right back into the toilet bowl. Emergency services rushed the young boy to the hospital, at which point he was stitched up and sterilized. Lucky for the teen, the doctor said his injured body part would be back to normal in no time. According to the New York Post, this isn't even the first time that someone in Thailand has been bitten by a snake while sitting on the toilet. A similar thing happened the January before this incident, with a Thai woman being hospitalized after a snake chomped onto her thigh as she was sitting down to do her business. Number 3. Snake nightmares. A mother in Australia woke up to find her son screaming and a giant snake wrapped around his stomach. Apparently, the 6-year-old boy had been targeted in his sleep by the sneaky snake. It wrapped itself around him and began biting him relentlessly in the face, prompting him to scream and wake his mother. The encounter involved a coastal carpet python that measured around 8 feet or 2.5 meters in length. Brian Robinson, wildlife management specialist for Queensland Fauna Consultancy, said it was a very unusual scenario because snakes almost exclusively bite in self-defense. But this snake went out of its way to bite the young boy in his sleep. Brian says the child could have rolled over onto the reptile, making it lash out at him angrily. But really, the big question here is why the snake was in the kid's bed at all. I guess the only answer is Australia, the one place on Earth where not even sleeping boys in their beds are safe from snakes. And yes, the boy did survive. The boy's family ripped the snake off of him and then disposed of it. Number 2. Attack of the Fer de Lance. A well-known conservationist from New Zealand named Peter Bethune was recently given treatment for a near-fatal attack that he received in the Costa Rican jungle. Peter was bitten by one of the deadliest snakes in all of Central America. It was a Fer de Lance snake. This snake is a type of viper and is wildly venomous. It can grow up to 7 feet long, or 2.2 meters, and a single bite is fatal to humans if they don't receive immediate medical attention. Lucky for Peter, he was treated by one of the best snakebite experts in the world. But even though he got to the hospital quickly and got treatment immediately, he was still left with only 50% usage of his calf where the snake bit him. He also developed a rash that wouldn't seem to go away, and had an endless throbbing in his leg that prevented him from sleeping. It took at least 5 days just to try and expel most of the venom from his liver and kidneys. And even when he does fully recover, he will have muscle damage for the rest of his life. What makes this extra tragic is that Peter has spent most of his life in the jungle fighting poachers and illegal miners. And it was while working to protect the Costa Rican jungle that one of the very creatures he's fighting for attacked and nearly killed him. Number 1. Attack of the Headless Snake. In a shocking turn of events, a headless snake on an Australian beach tried to attack a man and his dog. The unidentified man came across the headless serpent and filmed himself poking it with a tennis racket. This is understandable, considering the snake didn't have a head and he didn't expect it to try and bite him. But, to his horror, the reptile stirred at the touch of the racket and began slithering directly at the man. Of course, it had no fangs to bite with, but it was still pretty terrifying being hunted by something without a head. That's certainly something straight out of a nightmare. The snake swayed back and forth, moving forward as if trying to sense where the man was. Luckily, the snake was definitely no danger to anybody. Its head had clearly been ripped right off, with experts claiming it was probably eaten by a bird and then dropped on the beach. Snakes are able to live for several hours even without their heads because they don't need that much oxygen. Unlike other animals who would die immediately without oxygen being pumped into their brains, snakes hold on just a little bit longer. You have to admit though, that's gotta be a pretty miserable way to go. Sliding around on the beach without a head, just waiting to die? What's your scariest encounter with a snake? And seriously unfortunate condition, one known as plantar warts. These warts grow on people's feet and look like ugly white pieces of corn or like really nasty scabs. They're often caused by an HPV infection. Plantar warts can grow so big and become so foul on a person's foot that surgery is needed to remove them from the soles of the feet. If left untreated, these gross white warts growing like fungus on a person's feet can get so bad that amputation is necessary. And try what you may, but these things don't go away easily. Chemicals and acids don't get rid of them. Ointments don't get rid of them, and it's basically impossible to walk once the warts take over your feet. The worst part is you won't even know you have severe plantar warts until it's too late. As a word of advice, be sure to check your feet every now and again and see if you have white chalky stuff growing out of them. Number 9. Melting skin. Epidermolysis bullosa, or EB for short, is an incredibly rare genetic skin condition primarily characterized by very fragile skin. A person born with this unbelievable condition is constantly at risk of basically having their skin melt all the way off. The fragile skin is very easily damaged, which can lead to lots of blisters and wounds. The disease affects the mucous membranes as well, even inside of the respiratory system and the gastrointestinal tract. The disease is, quite frankly, debilitating. It even has a status as an orphan disease. Unfortunately, there is no cure yet for EB and barely any treatments available. The only thing that can be done is to soothe pain caused by the melting flesh. The science behind EB is shocking. EB is caused by poor anchoring of the epidermis to the underlying dermis. In simpler terms, the skin doesn't stick properly to the mucous membrane beneath. Think of wallpaper that doesn't stick to drywall and easily falls off. Only this is with human skin. The root cause of the poor anchoring is a defect in genes. The skin has no integrity. It's estimated that 20 in every 1 million live births will have epidermolysis bullosa. Someone suffering from this disease has a fairly low chance of survival. Number 8. The werewolf gene. Scientists have recently discovered a genetic mutation that causes people to turn into werewolves. Well, they don't exactly turn into man-eating monsters howling at the full moon, but they do grow exceptionally thick hair like wolf fur all over their faces and bodies. It can happen to both men and women, and the result is quite shocking. The disease itself is known as hypertrichosis, commonly referred to as Werewolf Syndrome. There have been fewer than 100 cases documented throughout history. What researchers do know about this wildly rare disease is that it runs in the family bloodline. Back in 1995, scientists traced the exact location of the mutation to part of the X chromosome in a Mexican family who had been affected by Werewolf Syndrome. About 30 people in the family have been diagnosed with hypertrichosis. Just recently, a girl from Thailand with Werewolf Syndrome earned her place in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the hairiest child in the world. At least there's some consolation to being born a werewolf. According to Live Science, the disease is probably caused by an extra piece of DNA that switches on hair growth and can't turn it off, turning people into real-life fur monsters. This gene is called SOX3. Have you ever heard of Werewolf Syndrome before? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, give this video a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 7. Benjamin Button disease. Did you know that the Benjamin Button disease is actually a very real thing? Not just a Hollywood movie starring our main man Brad Pitt. It's known properly as progeria disease, or Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome. This rare genetic condition doesn't exactly cause somebody to age backwards, though. What it does do is force a child's body to age much faster than normal. This is caused by a mutation in the LMNA gene. Tragically, children with this disease do not live past the age of 13. It's not even a question of maybe, they simply don't live past 13. Like most diseases, both boys and girls are equally vulnerable to being born with it. The only good news is that it's much rarer than most other diseases. Only about 1 in every 4 million babies will be born with the Benjamin Button disease. It's a mistake in the LMNA gene, which causes it to make an improper protein. The cells use the protein and they break down much easier than they normally would. With all these cells breaking down, children begin to age at a shocking rate. Unfortunately, for those born with Benjamin Button disease, there are no symptoms right away. They won't begin showing signs of the disease until later on in their first year of life. They'll start growing an extremely large head, their voice will be high-pitched, veins start bulging out of their body, and sometimes their eyes can get so big that they can't close them all the way. This is not as cute as the movie made it out to be. It's absolutely horrific, and as these children get older, they even develop diseases usually only seen in people older than 50. Ultimately dying of heart attack or stroke by the age of, 13. There is an immense need for research into the disease. Finding a cure for progeria will not only help these poor children, but may provide the solution for treating millions of adults with heart disease and strokes associated with naturally getting old. Number 6. Frog baby. A woman from Zimbabwe recently gave birth to a frog monster. As ridiculous as this sounds, it's 100% true. As reported by the Daily Mail, Precious Nyathi from a small village in the northwest of Zimbabwe was 8 months pregnant when she unexpectedly went into labor. This woman was 36 years old and otherwise pretty healthy. But rather than giving birth to a normal baby, she pushed out what villagers could only describe as a frog-like monster. The baby, unfortunately, died in the hospital, which isn't a huge surprise considering it was literally a frog. The village elder then ordered the woman to burn the creature in front of the other residents of the village, probably for reasons of a paranoid and superstitious nature. So far, nobody has offered a medical explanation for the unbelievable birth. Nobody's quite sure how she carried a tiny creature that resembled a frog in her stomach for 8 months. And with the remains of the frog mutant baby thing burned, probably to prevent some kind of curse, scientists will never know the answers. Maybe she kissed a frog 8 months before looking for her prince? What do you think? Number 5. Lobster Hands. Lobster Hands is a strange medical condition, also known as split hand/foot malformation. This limb abnormality is always present from birth. The physical attributes of lobster hands are exactly what they sound like. A person's hands look like lobster claws. Lobster hands can also be lobster feet. A person is born with fingers or toes missing, making their hands shaped like claws. They will also have some strange webbing between the few toes and fingers they do have. Split hand/foot malformation varies in severity. The most famous cases of lobster claws involve a person's third finger being replaced by a sort of cleft that tapers towards the wrist, effectively cutting a person's hand or foot into 2 parts. Nobody has narrowed down the exact cause of lobster hands yet, and unfortunately, there is no cure. People born with this condition are forced to suffer as lobster mutants for the rest of their lives, seeing as they can't grow their missing digits. Number 4. Mermaid Syndrome. Mermaid Syndrome, medically known as Syrian, is one of the more extreme rare conditions a person can be born with. It's actually a rare congenital development disorder that consists of anomalies of the lower limbs and lower spine. People who are born with Mermaid Syndrome suffer from a partial or full fusion of their legs, making them look like real-life mermaids. It's estimated that 1 in every 60,000 to 100,000 births are born with Syrian. And while it might be kind of interesting to be born a mermaid, the side effects are significantly more serious. People with Mermaid Syndrome often experience malformations and abnormalities inside of them, like in their gastrointestinal tracts. Additionally, they could have underdevelopment of both of their kidneys. Infants born with Mermaid Syndrome can have one or both feet rotated in the wrong direction. According to a report prepared in part by the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine, Mermaid Syndrome is often fatal in the first year of life. But, lucky for some, they are able to live all the way into adulthood. The only bummer is that Mermaid Syndrome doesn't help you swim. Number 3. Fish Odor Syndrome. Fish Odor Syndrome is one of the weirdest syndromes that people can be born with. It's a genetic disease with one main symptom: emitting a disgusting fish odor. You literally stink like rotten fish. It's an offensive body odor that you can't even cover up with the best deodorant, because the rotting fish smell is due to excretion that comes out of your sweat. You basically sweat fish slime. Not only that, but the excretion comes out of your breath and urine too. This means your toilet is gonna stink and you can't breathe on anyone. The source of all this stench comes from trimethylaminuria, or TMA, and fish odor syndrome itself is a result of a mutation in your FMO3 gene. Most cases of people having trimethylaminuria appear to be inherited in an autosomal recessive pattern, meaning both copies of the gene in each cell have mutations. The parents of an individual with an autosomal recessive condition often each carry one copy of the mutated gene, but usually don't show signs and symptoms. Carriers of an FMO3 mutation, however, may experience mild symptoms of trimethylaminuria or have temporary incidents of fish-like body odor. The only good news with fish odor syndrome is that people often don't have it for life. These symptoms are usually seen in infants and in healthy adult women when they begin menstruation. It's actually pretty easy to fix for older women by using acid lotions and soaps to remove the secretion coming out of their skin, or by switching to a better diet. Number 2. real-life gargoyle. There is a rare inherited connective tissue disorder that can turn a person into a gargoyle. The only bad news is that they don't sprout wings, and it's actually quite painful. Gargoyle syndrome, known in reality as fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, can be characterized by an abnormal development of bone in places inside the human body where bone is not meant to grow. The best examples of this are ligaments, skeletal muscles, and tendons. The onset of this disorder creates bones in places that are supposed to be soft and squishy. This is what turns you into a gargoyle. The skeletal muscles and soft connective tissue inside a person's body literally go through a metamorphosis in which they turn into rigid bone. Their joints lock in place and movement becomes impossible. People who suffer from gargoyle disease are even more prone to suffering from other skeletal malformations. Episodic flare-ups can be common, normally during childhood. There is no cure for turning into a human gargoyle, and it generally only gets worse and worse until a person is 100% immobilized and in constant, agonizing pain. Number 1. Fingers and toes. A baby has been born with 31 fingers and toes. And no, they aren't part of the X-Men. In the village of Chongping, China, a migrant worker gave birth to a child suffering from a severe case of polydactyly, which causes extra appendages to be born on a person. The child has 15 fingers on each hand. The kicker? He has no thumbs. The child only has fingers. But who needs thumbs with 15 fingers? The kid also has 16 toes. Of course, this kind of thing isn't normal. The poor baby will need to have 3 corrective surgeries to get rid of the extra toes before he can walk properly. What's really interesting in this case is that the child's mother also has extra digits. She has an extra finger on each of her hands, suggesting the condition is indeed hereditary. According to Dr. Zhu Xiai, the operation will involve cutting off each extra finger and toe, then reshaping the remaining digits to form something relatively normal. There are risks of damaging bones, joints, skin, and critical veins, but hopefully, the infant will come out on the other side okay. Surf and then proceeded to slither along the sand of the beach. Snakes don't really belong on the beach. They should be in the Everglades or literally anywhere else, with the exception of our houses, of course. It looks as though it had come in on a wave, and the crowd gathered to watch as the poor snake fought the tide to get back onto the shore. Even though the witnesses felt bad for the struggling snake, nobody was really dumb enough to try to help it. After all, this was a diamondback rattlesnake, extremely venomous and potentially lethal. Nobody knows why a rattlesnake ended up on the beach or how exactly it got into the water, but an animal control officer did eventually show up to save the beachgoers from the deadly serpent. According to witnesses, the animal control officer grabbed the snake by the head and simply dropped it into a carrier. The snake didn't even try to fight back. He must have been exhausted after all that swimming. Number 9. Banana frog. A frog recently made a pretty incredible journey, traveling 5,000 miles or 8,046 kilometers from Colombia to South Wales, hiding inside of a bunch of bananas. The exotic frog was discovered by supermarket staff as they were putting away the produce. The frog most likely survived its arduous journey inside of a cooler because it slowed down its metabolism and went into a kind of hibernation. Back in Colombia, the frog had probably been relaxing in the bunch of bananas, minding its own business, when they were picked by farmers, stuffed into a crate, and then shipped across the world. After the frog's bizarre journey, it was transferred to a specialist animal center to be properly cared for. Staff at the center claimed that the frog was probably a type of banana tree frog, though they did admit it was difficult to identify its species. After all, there are thousands of different frogs in the jungles of Colombia where the bananas were harvested. I guess it's just lucky that the staff at the supermarket found the frog before an unwitting family took the bananas home and ended up with an unexpected pet. Number 8. The cat in the wall. The last place anyone expects to find a cat is inside a wall. And yet, that's exactly what happened when Molly the cat got lost during her owner's move out of their house. When they were moving, they couldn't find the cat anywhere. They searched, and they even returned to the empty home and left out food, only to check in later to see that the food had not been eaten. Then the new owners of the house left out food and milk, hoping to lure the lost feline out of hiding. It would be 3 weeks since the cat had gone missing. Finally, the new owners of the house heard meowing coming from a wall near the kitchen. It turned out that the cat had somehow magically gotten stuck inside of a cavity in the wall. There seemed to be no way of rescuing the Houdini cat. So the new owners called the Derbyshire Fire and Rescue, and they came and tore up the floorboards, allowing them just enough space to lure the cat out of the cavity and save Molly's life. She was terribly skinny after all the time she spent stuck in the wall, but quickly fattened back up with all of her favorite kitty foods. Since the traumatic incident, Molly has been returned to her original guardians and is safe and sound. Number 7. Badger in a castle. An extremely angry badger recently caused a Scottish castle to close down after becoming a menace to the public. The Celtic Sphinx Castle in England had to be closed after the badger apparently became lost and took up shelter in the ancient residence. The badger actually caused quite a bit of a mess and stir as it was trying to dig its way out of the castle and ripping up the ancient stones. Luckily, the badger never attacked any of the guests, but it was still a safer call to just shut the whole place down. Staff had to lure the animal out of the underground cellar using cat food and honey. The castle itself was built in the 16th century. Even after the uninvited visitor vacated the premises and went back into the forest, the underground part of the castle had to remain closed because of the damage done to the stone masonry. The badger had been trying to tunnel its way out of the castle like some kind of medieval prisoner. Why do you think they didn't just call in animal services to get the badger out? Save the ancient floor, right? What would you do? Let me know in the comments and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. Koala in the Christmas tree. An Australian family got an unexpected Christmas gift when they discovered a furry ornament living inside of their tree. It was a live koala. Merry Christmas! The adorable little animal had somehow gotten tangled in the lights and plastic branches of their Christmas tree, and the family arrived home to see a living, breathing koala just kind of lounging on some garland on the tree in their living room. According to USA Today, the koala probably crawled in through the front door when no one was looking, explored the house for a few hours while the family was gone, then decided to take up residence inside of their Christmas tree. After all, it's not like the koala knows the difference between a real tree and a fake tree. It just saw a tree and decided to climb. Or maybe it liked all the pretty lights. Naturally, the family called their local koala rescue, but the rescue center actually thought it was a prank call at first. It took some convincing, but they did eventually come out and get the koala bear. The sad part behind this otherwise adorable story is that after the brutal wildfires in Australia, koala bears have become virtually extinct, with estimates saying there are less than 43,000 of them still alive, and that they are currently trending towards extinction because of habitat loss, driving them into people's homes and up into their Christmas trees. Save the koalas! Number 5. Pig Beach. In the Bahamas, there's an island called Big Major Cay. It's small, uninhabited by people, and home to an unusual group of feral pigs. These pigs seem to be concentrated at a place locally known as Pig Beach. Sounds like a blast. International guests who stay at the luxurious Foul Cay Resort have been feeding these beach pigs for so long that they've become part of the landscape. The pigs are so brave and so used to humans that they will even swim from the beach out into the sea to try to steal food from your boat. In fact, the pigs have been known to jump into people's boats and steal their lunches. As weird as it is to hear, the entire island in the Bahamas is controlled by pigs. They own the island, they do things on their own terms, and in the cooler parts of the day, they populate the entire beach area. Nobody knows exactly how many pigs are on the island or how they even got there. Some claim the pigs survived a shipwreck, and because the island was uninhabited and there were no predators, they just kind of flourished. Now that there are so many tourists visiting the local resorts, the pigs have found themselves with an endless supply of food. The only downside of having so many pigs near a Caribbean resort is that there have been some reports that have suggested tourists have killed pigs by giving them fatal doses of alcohol. Number 4. Giant lizard in a 7-Eleven. In Thailand, 7-Eleven is everywhere. 7-Eleven can be found on every corner in just about every district of the country. And apparently, so too can giant lizard monsters. Shoppers got a bit more than they bargained for when a giant monitor lizard broke into the store and began crawling up the shelves, knocking down bags of chips and other produce onto the floor and causing general mayhem. The lizard was absolutely massive, and yes, there are a lot of them in Thailand. Usually they tend to live near ponds and canals in humid climates. They can also be found in the sewers of Bangkok and apparently in the 7-Elevens of small towns in rural provinces. According to the report from NBC News, these lizards can reach about 6 feet or 1.8 meters in length, making them the second biggest lizards in the world next to the Komodo dragon. The lizard that invaded the small convenience store seemed to be at peak physical size. It was a beast. The thing managed to get onto a rack of food near the ceiling, where it stopped its reign of terror and took a break. Employees of the store phoned the police and they brought the reptile handlers to the scene to chase the giant animal away. Number 3. Rabbit in the couch. A woman in Melbourne thought that her beloved pet rabbit had gone to the great beyond after it went missing for over 3 weeks. The rabbit's name was Sharon, and she disappeared from the backyard, causing great mental distress for her owners. They thought she had gotten out and escaped, and was probably taken and eaten by some kind of large, hungry bird. 3 weeks after Sharon had gone missing, when the owners were just about ready to stop grieving, she was discovered inside the couch. Sharon was found when her owners had a guest spend the night. The guest pulled out the couch to sleep on it, and there was Sharon, literally stuck inside the couch. She had been there for 3 weeks and didn't at all seem stressed out about it. The rabbit was a bit skinny, but otherwise perfectly fine. In fact, when she was found, Sharon was happily munching away on the interior of the couch. She had been eating feathers and couch fibers for 22 days. She is now back to the yard and eating more suitable food. Number 2. The Tiger of Harlem. A man in Harlem kept a 425-pound, that's 193 kilogram, tiger in his apartment. If this seems like a bad place to keep a tiger, that's because it is. The tiger keeper was a man named Antoine Yates, also known as New York City's Tiger Man. It was back in 2001 when Yates brought a tiger cub home with him to his Big Apple apartment, with the young big cat being only 8 weeks old. Naturally, the tiger grew, and all the while, Yates just kept it inside of his tiny living quarters where he lived in a Harlem housing project. And this guy wasn't a doctor or a veterinarian, he was a construction worker. He really had no business even having a tiger. No one even discovered what was going on until 2003, at which point they were forced to take action. But when the authorities tried to remove the enormous cat from Yates' apartment, they also discovered a huge alligator being kept there too. This guy had a whole menagerie inside of his tiny apartment. Both the animals were transferred to a sanctuary in Ohio, where the tiger died from natural causes in 2019. As for Yates, he spent a bit of time in jail for illegally keeping exotic animals in his apartment. He enjoyed a brief 15 minutes of fame, saying in a report, "Consciously, I knew I had a tiger, but the physical interaction and bonding, it was so natural. It was no different than raising a monkey or a snake." Yates claimed his ultimate goal was to build an animal sanctuary that would serve as a new concept of animals living together. Way to dream big. How he never got eaten by one of his pets is simply boggling. Either one of the animals was perfectly capable of devouring him. Number 1. The Cave of Snakes. There is a terrifying place in Mexico where snakes literally hang from the ceiling. If the thought of dozens, even hundreds of hungry snakes dangling above your head in the dark terrifies you, you're not the only one. You probably never want to visit what is known as the Cave of Hanging Snakes. It's located near the small village of Cantemo in a remote part of the Yucatan Peninsula. The snakes who reside in the cave have evolved to live high up on the cavern walls and inside the crevices of the ceiling. where they then hang down at night to catch flying bats right out of the air. It's arguably the most horrific place on Earth, not exactly the kind of location you'd pick for a weekend excursion. In fact, some people have called this the creepiest cave in the world, as there's even a flooded part deep within that houses blind albino crustaceans freaky enough to make you run out of the cave screaming, with yellow-red rat snakes snapping at your hair. Into a nightmare of horrors. Visitors to the beach have reported seeing a young woman standing ominously at the side of the road as if looking for a ride. According to Central Coast News, some have even tried to give this young woman the ride she's looking for, only to realize they're not talking to a woman in the passenger seat. She was never there at all. They had picked up a ghost from the side of the road. The police have apparently received reports of this exact thing happening more than once. And it's not a new phenomenon either. The haunted beach has been terrifying locals for over 40 years. What's truly interesting about the haunted beach is that there's only one ghost responsible for the terror that goes on here. She was apparently beaten by a group of young men in the 1970s and left on the beach to die. Ever since, she's been terrorizing mostly male visitors and has allegedly been responsible for driving some people to madness. Some locals claim the woman's name was Jenny Dixon, and the beach was named after her. But this has not been confirmed. And if you don't believe the stories, just head down to Jenny Dixon Beach and wait for nightfall. Maybe she'll find you. Number 9. Attacked by dogs. A family's relaxing trip to the beach turned into a violent incident of teeth and blood after a vicious dog attack. The incident happened in April during the Easter holiday. John and Tammy took their 2 young children and their puppy to Southport Beach. When they arrived, one of the first things they noticed was that a dog was running around off its leash, and that it looked kind of dangerous, but they didn't really think too much of it. The family unpacked their stuff, they headed out to the sand, and within just minutes of settling down for some sun and relaxation, the same dangerous-looking dog that they saw earlier came out of nowhere and bit Tammy on the wrist. Unprovoked, the aggressive dog tried to rip Tammy's arm off. The dog also attacked their small puppy, tearing it apart like a piece of raw meat. When John tried to intervene and get the dog off his wife, it was so strong that it broke his finger. Everyone survived the attack, but their young puppy was never the same again. He had to be placed on medication and painkillers and has yet to get off the sofa. He's like a traumatized war veteran. The kids were totally fine. Tammy eventually recovered from her injuries, and as for the rabid dog, it apparently got off totally free after its owner secured the ferocious beast and then ran away with it. Number 8. Deadly shark attack. An American woman snorkeling in the Bahamas had a pretty bad time after being murdered by a shark. She had gone to the Bahamas with her family as part of a beach vacation. But, according to ABC News, she was attacked by a gang of angry sharks and killed. Investigators have said that they think there were at least 3 sharks involved in what seems to be a malicious and possibly even targeted attack. The victim's name was Jordan Lindsay, a 21-year-old girl from California. She was in the Bahamas with her whole family, with the majority of them swimming on the beach while Jordan and her mother were at another part of the island snorkeling. The rest of Jordan's family had no idea that on the other side of the island, Jordan was being ripped to shreds by sharks. But her mother certainly knew, as she was only a few feet away from Jordan when the sharks attacked. Jordan's mother was forced to watch as her daughter had her arms ripped right off by one of the sharks, while the other 2 bit huge chunks of her legs and buttocks. The water turned red with blood. Even though Jordan was transported to the hospital, it was too late. She was already dead. Talk about a bad day at the beach. Number 7. Stabbed at the Jersey Shore. At Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, someone was stabbed to death after getting into a brawl with a teenager from Newark. The teen has since been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. The incident happened in the area of 300 Boardwalk. Police were called in to deal with a violent situation. When they arrived, they discovered that a fight had broken out between 2 groups of people. both of whom had presumably gone to the beach to relax and be left alone. Well, one of the people involved in the fight was packing a knife. He attacked two people with that knife, stabbing them repeatedly. By the time the police got there, two young males had suffered multiple stab wounds and needed to immediately be transported to the local hospital. Luckily, they survived the ordeal and were last reported as being in stable condition. What makes this incident so much more disturbing is that it happened on a family beach. This is a place where people go with their kids to get a weekend break. But if you're in New Jersey, it's also a place where people go to stab people in broad daylight. Have you ever experienced something crazy on the Jersey Shore? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. Buried alive. A young man in his 20s was recently arrested after being accused of trying to bury his wife alive at a beach in California. Something straight out of a 1990s Eminem song, this guy allegedly dragged his wife to the ocean and tried to kill her. The woman miraculously managed to escape and run away, at which point she was discovered on the sidewalk by an ordinary citizen. Paramedics quickly arrived at the scene and transported the woman to a trauma center in San Diego. The man who took his wife to the beach to murder her was then found hiding in the backyard of a random home in the area. Let's back this up a bit. A couple visited the beach earlier in the evening, probably as one of those ordinary things that couples do. But then they got into an argument. The husband got angry and started to beat up his wife. In a fit of rage, he dragged her all the way to the water to try to throw her out to sea, but then decided to bury her alive in the sand instead. Of course, he didn't get down on his hands and knees and start digging a shallow grave in the sand. Instead, the guy used a hole that had probably been dug earlier in the day by kids, seeing as this is, after all, a family beach. The violent husband threw his wife into the hole and started shoving sand over her head to fill it up. It was lucky she managed to scramble out of the sand and run for help before she suffocated. Number 5. The Hungry Dingo. On Fraser Island, a child was attacked and almost killed after wandering away from his family on Orchid Beach. What exactly attacked the poor toddler? Only 2 years old at the time? It was a hungry dingo. According to the report from The Guardian, paramedics claimed the boy was lucky that he hadn't sustained more serious injuries. He had been savagely mauled by the dingo and only managed to survive because neighbors in the area where the attack took place heard the boy screaming and rushed outside. If it hadn't been for their quick thinking, the kid probably would have been eaten by a dingo. Of course, this is just another thing that you can add to the long list of reasons to never visit an Australian beach. If you don't get eaten by a shark or stung by a jelly, now a dingo will run away with your toddler and try to eat it. The child reportedly suffered wounds to his legs and arms, and he even had a pretty nasty laceration on the back of his head. He had to be flown to the nearest hospital along with his mother, leaving the rest of this horrified family to try and enjoy the remainder of their beach vacation. The dingo? Well, it got away. Number 4. The angriest octopus. A man in Australia came across yet another horrifying animal while at a local beach. But it wasn't a dingo or a shark. Instead, it was a vicious octopus that had murder on its mind. The incident occurred when the man was swimming in Geograph Bay. He found the octopus in shallow water trying to take down a seagull. The octopus literally came out of its home deep in the water to bully birds on land. Lance Carlson managed to capture the angry octopus on video, but unfortunately he got a little too close for the octopus's comfort. The octopus didn't like the look of him, so it scuttled away back to its garden. But shortly after, Lance went swimming and came across the home of the octopus. It was a crab graveyard where the unruly creature had apparently posted up. Angry to see the man again, and at its home no less, the octopus attacked. It lashed out with its many arms and struck Lance on the neck. During the attack, Lance's goggles got fogged and he couldn't see what was happening. All he knew was that he was being brutally attacked by an angry octopus, with pain shooting all across his neck. Thinking quickly, Lance retreated. He managed to get back to shore, at which point he discovered that he was covered in red marks from being beaten by the cephalopod. He treated the stings and sores with vinegar and learned his lesson. Stay out of octopus territory. Number 3. Attacked and robbed. A family from Belleville visiting Nordhook Beach have had a pretty nasty experience. There were 3 members of the family walking along the beach at a perfectly reasonable time of day, taking in the sights and enjoying a bit of relaxation, really just minding their own business. Out of nowhere, criminals attacked and robbed them, even stabbing a 54-year-old woman until she nearly died. The criminals stabbed the woman in the head, making it extremely lucky that she's alive today. Nordhook Beach is in Cape Town, South Africa. It is sometimes a nice place to be, but this has turned into an issue, seeing as it's very popular with tourists from Europe and America. This makes it a prime place for criminals to hang out. Previous to the poor woman being stabbed in the head, a tourist from Egypt was also stabbed at the same beach in January. And in that same month, at least 9 people were attacked at a nearby nature reserve by 2 men who pretended to be hikers. The moral of the story here is that you're not safe on the beach, in the bay, on a hiking trail, or really anywhere ever. Number 2. Kidnapped in Bali. A tourist in Bali just trying to enjoy his holiday time on the beach was kidnapped and swindled out of thousands of dollars in what has been reported as a horrifying scam that purposely targets tourists on vacation. But just wait until you see how complicated this bizarre scam really is. It all began with a New Zealander in Bali. He was with his family trying to relax on the beach when he was approached by a man for a friendly chat. The friendly chat turned violent, and somehow the man from New Zealand suddenly ended up in a locked car being driven to a remote location. At this remote location, he was forced to partake in a game of cards. Naturally, he lost the card game and was forced to pay a startling sum of money, about $2,000. After taking the horrified tourist to an ATM and forcing him to withdraw as much money as possible, they left him alone. The whole ordeal lasted about 4.5 hours. The robbers put the tourist in a taxi and let him go back to his hotel. But instead of any kind of resolution happening after the man contacted the local embassy, they simply told him to go home as soon as possible. The local police didn't care. The man and his wife no longer felt safe, and they called off their beach vacation early, paying an extra $2,000 to change their flights. That was probably the last vacation the couple will go on. Number 1. A body at the beach. 3 teenage boys found a bit more than they bargained for when they showed up at the beach to waste away a Sunday afternoon. The teenagers found a shoe. Being the courteous teenagers that they were, they went to dispose of the shoe in the garbage bin. What they discovered in the garbage bin would ruin their entire day. Nestled inside of the trash at the bottom of the garbage can was a pile of human bones. The police were called to the scene at Burunda Beach, Australia. They matched the DNA of the bones found by the teenagers to a missing woman. The missing woman was Melissa Caddick, and she had vanished 3 months previous from her mansion in Sydney. Nobody had any idea where she went. That was because she had been a pile of bones in a dumpster. This was one of the most high-profile disappearances in Australia in recent years. Melissa Caddick had allegedly conned her friends and family out of over $20 million, making her something of a pariah among her own social group. But despite the fact that Melissa had all kinds of enemies, the police couldn't for the life of them figure out what happened to her or if she was even murdered. As of now, absolutely nobody has been held responsible for the woman's bones being found at the beach. Thanks for watching. What was your scariest trip to the beach like? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more wild videos from the channel.